Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark McCord, Chief of Party for the USAID Economic Security Program in Georgia. Over the last few weeks, in our Wednesday webinar series, we have looked at a number of different areas that are important to business. Things like leadership, human resources, grant proposal writing. Today, we are adding another topic to that list, and that's negotiation. This is a topic that's very near and dear to me because it's been part and parcel of what I've done throughout my career. In economic development, virtually every day is a negotiation. And this is also a topic that has been explored in great depth by many different scholars and experts around the world. So you might think, what is there new that I can learn about negotiation? Well, if you'll stay with me to the end of this video, I think that you may learn something new. Because I come at negotiation not from a theoretical platform, but from a practical one, because I've been involved in it so much. And I start with one basic principle that I learned not from someone around a negotiation table, but actually from a TV show. Yes, you heard me right. I learned it from a TV show. The show, which aired in the United States for many years and was very popular there, was called House MD. And the star of that show was a drug-addicted doctor who was not a very nice person most of the time, had very little bedside manner, and even fewer people skills. His name was Gregory House. And he had one basic philosophy by which he operated as a doctor and a diagnostician. And that is, everybody lies. Now, you may think that's funny. You may disagree. But the fact is that at the root, Dr. House is right. Everybody lies. You may say, well, I don't lie. I tell the truth all the time. I don't have it within me to lie. Okay, let me give you an example. What if your spouse walked into the room before you left for a party wearing something that you felt was just hideous? And he or she asked, how do I look? What would you say? Would you say, oh, you look fantastic, never better? Or would you say, I think that you should wear something else. That doesn't really look very good at all. Now, a big majority of us would say the former, even if we knew the latter to be true. Why? Because there are times when telling an untruth will save somebody's feelings, and it doesn't cost us anything, and it doesn't create an issue. It's simply out of kindness we say something that we don't necessarily believe. When I was growing up, they called those little white lies. Well, maybe they are, but they're still lies. And the reason I'm talking about this is in negotiation, we come at the whole system of trying to get what we want for our client or for ourselves from the perspective that everybody lies. And I'm going to reinforce that through this presentation. So let's get started. What's the definition of negotiation? Well, there's a long definition that basically says this, that negotiation is dialogue intended to resolve disputes or issues, to produce an agreement or a course of action, to bargain for individual or collective advantage, or to create outcomes to satisfy various interests. But what is it really? Well, I'll tell you what negotiation is really. The definition is easy. I want what I want, and you're in my way. Here's a news flash, the first one of this video. Most people don't have your best interest at heart. Believing the best in the person sitting across the negotiating table from you doesn't make it true. That's what Dr. House said. And I found that to be true. You can believe whatever you want, but the fact is that when you sit down for a negotiation, one side wants what they want, the other side wants what they want. And so you don't come to a negotiation out of a sense of, or out of a place of trust and collaboration necessarily. You come in a negotiation because you have something to accomplish and you need to accomplish that thing. In other words, you want what you want and someone is in your way. So what are the approaches to negotiation? There are four that I want to talk about briefly. The first is the advocate. You can always tell a negotiator that is an advocate because they are constantly pushing for some position. They're either advocating for their own position, or they are advocating for someone else's, or they're advocating for a particular point of view. And they want the other side to know that in some cases that they're even their advocate by saying things like, well, I'm trying to help you. If you can accept this particular thing, then not only does it help me, it helps you. So I'm really trying to help you. Or, yes, I can advocate your position, but you need to understand mine too. There's nothing wrong with that approach. In some negotiations, it's actually very effective. The second approach to negotiation is the creative approach. I used this approach in the past when negotiating on the passage of a helmet law in a state in the United States. A helmet law meaning motorcycle riders had to wear helmets. And without going into the whole liturgy of the negotiation, which took many, many weeks, we had to use creative approaches. And that creative approach led us to a creative solution, which was the adoption of a helmet law for everyone under the age of 18 years old, which protected the federal funding from the United States government to that state, and also established a threshold of safety that was important. But we had to get very creative to do that, including changing our clothes, not wearing suits because we were negotiating with guys that rode motorcycles. It even included going to a biker rally. A very creative approach to solving a problem. The third approach to negotiation is one that is well known. It's win-lose. I want to win, but in order to win, for me to win, I need you to lose. It's not very complicated and has been the baseline of negotiation since negotiation began. The fourth approach is called win-win. Now here I want to say something very controversial because there have been many books written about win-win negotiation. And there are times when you can negotiate a resolution that is acceptable to both parties. But you need to understand something. That's not your goal as a negotiator when you sit down at the table. Your goal as a negotiator is not to make sure that you win and the people across the table win. Your goal as a negotiator is to ensure that you win. If they can get something too, excellent. If not, not your issue. You have a client to serve or a position that needs to be addressed. That's your job. Your job is not to ensure everybody wins. So let's just understand that right now. And I know that the individuals who have promoted win-win negotiation have made millions of dollars. And good for them. Good negotiating. But the fact is, in many cases in negotiation, win-win is not an approach that's going to lead you to the resolution that you want. But I want to be very clear that it can work in some instances and can be very effective in some instances. But remember, negotiation's about conflict. If everyone agrees, there's no reason to negotiate. There's some rules for negotiation that I also want to address. The first one is that when you're negotiating, accept only creative outcomes. What we used to do is pull out a flip chart, because this was the old days before we did everything digitally. We would pull out a flip chart and we would write observations on the flip chart, like brainstorming. And the first 20 to 30 were pedantic, wouldn't resolve the issue. That was just the easy stuff. The creative solution to the negotiation came after all the obvious things had been exhausted, and you really had to come to some type of innovative place where you can address an issue. A second rule is get to know the real issue. It's funny in negotiations sometimes that you're arguing about things that aren't even the issue. You're arguing about various technicalities that don't really focus on the absolute issue. When we were negotiating on this helmet law, we spent days going back and forth about the need for restoration of federal funding for the state by bikers wearing helmets. It was going nowhere because they didn't care. It wasn't until we finally drilled down into what the real issue was that we were able to make headway. And the real issue was a safety issue, not for the bikers themselves, but for their families. When we made the case that if you're under 18 years old, you should wear a helmet because you care about your children and you want them to be safe, that argument started to resonate because we got to the real issue. It was no longer about the government enforcing a law, because the bikers weren't interested in that at all. As a matter of fact, not only were they not interested, they would push back against it because they loved that freedom on the road. It became about their families and the safety of their families. And that was the real issue. A third negotiation rule is know what you want the end result to look like. Know what you want to accomplish before you sit down at the negotiating table. It's just like a roadmap. If you want to drive to a specific location, then not only do you need to know where that location is, you need to know the most direct route to getting there. So when you sit down and negotiate, you need to really understand what the end result looks like that you can accept. A fourth rule, don't just adjust to cultural differences, exploit them. If you're negotiating in a multicultural setting, you need to understand how to negotiate with the people across the table. You need to understand their cultural norms. You need to, as much as possible, abide by those cultural norms. You need to utilize those cultural norms. For instance, if you are negotiating with a group in Japan, the person that you're negotiating with is likely not the decision maker. Who would that decision maker be? Most likely the most senior man in the room who's sitting there saying nothing. If you know that, then you can start to look for verbal cues. You can start to determine a course of action based on understanding the cultural differences. Another rule of negotiation, gather intelligence and reconnoiter. Do your homework. If you don't do your homework, then you have no business at the negotiating table. It is like getting in a car, starting it up, and driving away with a blindfold on. Something bad is going to happen. you need to assume that those that you're negotiating with have already done their homework. So you need to know your side, you need to know their side, and you need to know everything else that will prepare you to achieve the result that you want within the negotiation. Another rule: design the information and process flow of the sessions. Organize them. Don't wander in the wilderness. Ensure that information is flowing in a way that's comfortable for you and that achieves the result in the negotiation. Also, invest in personal relationships. Build relationships with the individuals with which you're negotiating. Understand where they're coming from. I now know more about bikers today than I ever knew before. Why? Because I took the time to get to know them. I even rode on one of their motorcycles. I began to understand where they were coming from and realizing that they were much different than I thought they were. And that helped in the negotiation. Another rule: persuade with questions. Questions are excellent tools in a negotiation because they elicit information, right? They bring out information that you need, and also they're non-confrontational in most cases. Rather than making a harsh statement, you simply ask a question to elicit more information. You put the person you're negotiating with at ease, and you gain information on your side. Another rule: find out what motivates a person. We did this with the bikers and in many other negotiations that I've been involved in. We have found out what motivates the other side, what truly motivates them. And if you understand that, then you can utilize your knowledge within a negotiation. Another rule is make no concessions until the end. If you concede anything too early, you're already at a disadvantage in the negotiation. Understand what it is that you can give up or will give up to achieve the result that you want, but don't give up anything too early, or you'll be at a disadvantage. Another rule is to use techniques of creativity. We talked about this earlier. Be creative in your approach. Get up and walk around the room. Take a break. Go outside. Play basketball. Do whatever you need to do to be creative. Use a storyboard. Even use videos or illustrations. Whatever it takes to be creative, to make your point, and to further your point of view to get a successful result in your negotiation, you should use. And continue that creativity after the negotiation ends. But most of all, what's the biggest rule in negotiation? Accomplish your goal. Achieve what you set out to achieve when you sat at the negotiating table. So what are some negotiating styles? We've talked about a couple already. One of them is accommodating. There's always someone in a negotiation who wants to accommodate the other side. Is the room the way you wanted? Is it set up the way you wanted? Is the temperature right? Is the sun in your eyes? Is the screen bright enough for you to see it? And typically the reason they're doing that is to build rapport. Maybe they're a nice person. Maybe they're an accommodating person by nature. That's great. But typically that technique is used to start building rapport and letting the other side start to become at ease. Another style is avoiding. Avoiding, at least initially, those conflict areas that are going to bog down the negotiation. Either by redirecting certain questions or by avoiding tackling those big and complex issues up front and saving those for later. Another style is collaborating. Someone who is a collaborator in a negotiation often says, look, let's get in teams, let's get in small groups, let's work together and break down this particular issue and then come back to the table as a larger group and talk about it. Again, this builds rapport and it relaxes people. Another style is competing. Many times you see someone at a negotiation table who is obviously competing with the other side. They want to be the smartest kid in the room. I've seen this many times in negotiations. I haven't seen it work very many times, but there are people that have that style where they want to compete. There are also those who are compromisers. They're the ones that say after a tough part of a negotiation, okay, listen, we heard your side, you heard ours. Let's find a way through this maze. Let's find a compromise that we can live with. You need people like that at the negotiating table, but they need to know when to compromise and when not to. Another style is conflict-oriented. Many times you will come across a person at the negotiating table, usually someone who is using the competing style, who becomes conflict-oriented. And they will purposely drive conflict in order to throw off the other side and get them thinking, get them frustrated or stressed out, or get them thinking in a direction that's not going to benefit their negotiating style. And therefore, your team has the advantage. Again, the conflict-oriented style needs to be used sparingly, but I've often seen it used in negotiation. Another style that I want to address is called good cop, bad cop, where you have someone on your team who is always trying to build connections, and another person on the team who is this conflict person who will say the incendiary comments and talk tough and make the difficult decisions. And the good cop balances that out. That's a technique that is often used in negotiation, but again, it has to be used in the right context. When negotiating, think about what you want and what you're willing to accept. Again, you have to know what the end result is that you're trying to achieve. If you know that, if you know what you want and what you're willing to accept, then you are already halfway home in a negotiation. Don't quantify your request, at least initially. Keep things broad enough that you have flexibility to maneuver within the negotiation. Don't base your request on arbitrary criteria. That will put the negotiation in too narrow a context in the beginning and make you appear to be petty and inflexible, and that's not what you want in a negotiation. Talk to who counts. We talked about this earlier. Know who you're really negotiating with. Is it the person that's talking with you, or is it someone else in the room? Are you talking to the decision maker, or is that decision maker even not in the room? And you need to be aware of who's going to make that decision. Also be confident and ask for what you want. Don't be intimidated, but also don't be arrogant. Simply be confident and say, this is what I want. This is what I need from this negotiation. This is what I'm willing to accept. And don't back down. Don't be inflexible, but also don't allow the other side to change what it is that you need out of the negotiation. Never make it personal. This is a very difficult challenge in a negotiation sometimes because emotions are running high. But never put yourself in a situation where you attack somebody personally or you make the discussion focus on personalities instead of issues. And of course, explain the why before the what. Why is it that you want a particular result? Okay? Why do you want it before what you want? The reason I have this position, or the reason we have this position, is because we need to accomplish this. The why before the what. Also, when negotiating, be quiet sometimes. Just sit and listen. I've seen many negotiators who tried to overwhelm everyone through talk. And typically in negotiation, the more you talk, the bigger hole that you dig for yourself. Be quiet sometimes and just see what's going on around you, hear what's going on around you, and absorb information. Also, as we've said before, be creative. But use pressure points. Understand people well enough to know when you can press and when you can step back. Who you can press and who you need to back off from. What issues you need to put forth and what issues you need to pull back. Know what those pressure points are. Give up what doesn't matter and dig in to protect what does. Go into the negotiation realizing that you have a list of things that you can give up, and be ready to do that. Things that don't really matter in the negotiation, that don't really affect the end result that you want, you can give those up. And that's part of appearing to be flexible. If you've presented all your arguments and you haven't succeeded, then walk away. You're not going to be successful in every negotiation. Get what you can get, but sometimes you realize that this is not going in your direction, and it's not going to go in your direction, and you have to walk away. But most of all, don't have any regrets and learn from the experience. Everything I've learned about negotiation, I've learned by being in negotiations. Not from a book, not from a professor, not in theory or watching a YouTube video. What I learned by sitting at a negotiation table. And that's really where you have to learn. So, when do you know you're winning in a negotiation? Well, there are several ways. You know you're winning, first of all, when the other side begins to argue, because now you've got them off track. They're either arguing with you or sometimes arguing with each other. You begin to realize, if they're arguing, that means that we must be making some points that are beginning to resonate with them or beginning to concern them. The same is true when the other side loses their cool. They get upset. That is possibly one indicator that you're being successful in the negotiation. When the other side starts to stammer or lose their train of thought, that could be another sign that you're being successful in the negotiation. When the other side exhibits defeatist body language, something like, or all of those body language styles are indicative of someone who believes that something is moving in a direction that is out of their control or a negative direction in terms of negotiation, and could mean that your arguments are being successful. When the other side won't retain eye contact, it could mean that your arguments are being successful and that you are, quote unquote, winning in the negotiation. When the other side keeps repeating the same demands or focusing on the same issues, it typically means they're running out of arguments. And so if you focus on those issues that they are polarized on and remove those issues, then that's a good tell that you have the ability to be successful in that negotiation. Well, when you realize this, you need to focus in on getting what you can. If there's anything that you can come away from the table with, you need to do that. But never act desperate. Never panic. And certainly don't burn bridges. Don't get personal and burn bridges that you may have to cross later on. You've heard the old adage, never burn a bridge that you're standing on at the time. If you're at a negotiating table and you burn the bridge, you're on that bridge. So you have made a serious error in burning it. Don't sulk or pout. Nobody likes it in your personal life, nobody likes it in your professional life, and nobody likes it around a negotiation table. Sulkers and pouters don't do anything but put off their own team and show the opposition that they're winning. If you're not winning or you realize you aren't going to win, remain dignified and controlled. Be professional at all times. And remember, there are other negotiations. It's not just about that day, it's about what comes later on. Immediately debrief your team. After the negotiation concludes, Sit with your team and say, okay, where did we go wrong? What did we not do that put us in this position? Or what did we do to put us in this position? What did we not know? What homework did we not do to put us in this position? Do a thorough debrief and use it as a learning experience. But most of all, never, ever, ever forget what it feels like to lose. Dr. House used to say, I'm not fine as in fine, but fine as in you don't have to worry about me. When you lose a negotiation, you're not going to be fine. But you need to also understand that there'll be another negotiation on another day, and hopefully you will learn something that will make you better in that context. You can be a great negotiator if you prepare, make your demands clear, learn from your mistakes, don't gloat over your wins, don't pout over your losses, and remain calm and consistent. Because at the end of the day, you have to realize that everybody lies. Everybody lies. That is the part and parcel of negotiation. Whether you like it or not, whether you agree with that statement or not, get around a negotiating table, and in the first 10 minutes of the negotiation, somebody is going to lie to you. I'm not even necessarily saying that's bad, but it's real. Somebody's going to do that, and that is the defining point of the negotiation, because that will let you know what you need to do to build your strategy, to make your points, and to come away from the negotiation with the outcome that you desire. So, some questions that you need to ponder on your own. What does negotiation look like where you are? In different areas of the world, negotiation looks differently. So think about, what does negotiation look like where you are? If you're in Georgia, for instance, the country where I am sitting now, negotiation may look differently than in Europe or in North America. What does negotiation look like for you? Also think about, how might you have to negotiate in your position? Within your company or within your organization, how might you have to negotiate on a daily basis? Also think about, how is negotiation in your region defined? How do people who negotiate view negotiation? Do they view it as, we need to find win-win? Do they view it as confrontational? Do they view it as compromising? How do they view negotiation? And finally, what is your own style of negotiation? We talked about styles earlier. Which one are you? And can you change styles? Are you adaptable enough to change negotiating styles? So, this has been a little bit about negotiation through the lens of Gregory House, MD. From the premise that everybody lies, but that negotiation is part of our daily lives, whether it's personally or professionally, and there are specific techniques we can use to navigate to the end result that we want. I hope you've learned something today. Hope you're enjoying our Wednesday webinar series, and we'll see you next time. I'm Mark McCord, Chief of Party, USAID Economic Security Program from Georgia, wishing you a good day.